We are live. Welcome to another episode of the New York Information Security Meetup. And I have the great pleasure to introduce Kory Daniels, who's Chief Information Security Officer for Trustwave. How are you, Kory? Thanks for joining
David,
me.
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful day in New York, getting ready for some holiday, well-deserved vacation. So life is good for me. How are you doing, David?
Good. And I'm so happy that I managed to catch you just before heading out. So much appreciated. And also very excited. You have such a radiophonic voice, and I'm sure this is something that you've heard before. So this is going to be converted into a podcast as well. And we probably don't have to do much of audio editing. You sound amazing. So and you probably heard that before.
Yeah, well, it's a face for radio, right? I'm sure while there's not much, maybe a tune-up on the audio, I'm sure, I feel bad for the graphics team and how much effort they'll need.
Too modest. Hey, Kory, so why don't we get started with, you've done amazingly well in the cybersecurity space. You have a very senior title now in one of the fastest growing cybersecurity MSSPs out there. So I want to just kind of maybe touch upon that. And how did you get started in cyber?
Sure. No, I love this question because, it's, my journey into cyber, I think, has been a different path than most, right? I went to, college, university, expecting to be a lawyer, may have not had the appropriate academic performance in order to achieve or enter the, I'll call it the target, law school that I wanted to get to. And, just happened to have an opportunity working with a, SIM organization, 20 years ago for Intel Tactics. And so that was my entry into the cybersecurity world, was this little thing called SIEM and SIM. And, at the time, not really appreciating or even realizing kind of what type of technology it was, or kind of what was its core purpose on Earth in the market. But as I quickly learned and developed an understanding of security monitoring and threat detection response through a technology lens, it started to open up conversations with organizations in the market about, well, is it the challenge around the adoption of SIM, or did that, the challenge around the people in the process side? And so I started to develop I'll call it a curiosity of just how, was this localized only to, and at the time I was doing a lot of work with civilian and DoD, was this localized only to the civilian and DoD market, or do other organizations have these challenges as well? And this was back in, 2006, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Looking at, the big DITS cap to DI cap transition, a lot of DoD agencies looking at, enhancing reporting around compliance. And it opened up the opportunity to start looking at, well, what about beyond compliance, and start identifying, let's look at the data sets that you need even to demonstrate compliance. But now that you have this data set, are you at the bar of your cyber program's kind of barometer of success, or are you now looking to take it a step further? Or once you've demonstrated compliance, kind of where do you go from here? Like, do you hang up your hat, job done, mission success, thank you organization, I can now retire, successfully? Or is it about how do we now start kind of using security to drive more business conversation now? But it absolutely had to start with, looking through the lens of compliance, demonstrating the credibility of achieving compliance. But then that opened up kind of the door to new conversations. So, my pathway, I started in sales, right? And I love it. And I often get questions in terms of kind of, from my kind of role as a, Chief Information Security Officer of, how, going through a non-technical lens into this role, sometimes I get questions around that. But I find that my time and experience in sales has been so valuable, and such a unique attribute that I find to be such an important part of success for this role. In selling externally, selling is as important to selling internally. How do you establish buy-in from your peers? How do you communicate effectively and set the expectations appropriately with the board?
And I think, Kory, to double click on that, it's a consultative sale, right? So you are engaged with some very senior folks at the highest level, and having conversation eye level with them. And after a while, it's sink or swim. You either have to match to their level very quickly by osmosis or by on-the-job training, or they're not going to respect you and going to have to find another job. So, there's something to be said about getting hands-on experience with talking to security professionals, on a regular basis. You have to learn. Otherwise, you're not going to survive.
Oh, 100%. And that's, I shifted what the reason why I left sales was I quickly realized that my appetite for solving problems extended beyond when the commission check came through, as nice as it was, but really looking at, what about helping organizations adopt and maximize the use, kind of taking that step further, that it's not about just kind of, the role of in terms of sales is that once you cross that finish line and now the expectations to pivot and find the other, was not fulfilling enough for, what I needed. And so I looked down, the consulting path, and IBM was a great organization to really mature, I'll call it, my consultative approach into a more transformative, I'll call it, skill set, and helping organizations look at, what does Kory want to be famous for? And what I looked at, kind of the big things of what I felt really important was, how can I use some of these skills that I've developed through the sales lens, but now use it to help organizations go from point A to point B, right? How do we look at now kind of taking that next step and not just achieving project success, but, how do you ensure that project success actually materialize to operational efficiencies, that project success actually, translated to, how do we ensure it was sustainable? I've seen so many organizations and efforts where you put so much emphasis on the project itself and either try to do too much or try to accelerate so much change. And then you get to the finish line and was it sustainable or did, yes, we achieved success in our project, but what's the so what in doing that, right? What did it actually, synthesize back to our organization for, how this materialistically enhanced our maturity, but not just on a paper, but, our operational teams can sustain it. Our D4 team, our vulnerability team, our threat intel, the IT teams and responsible for technology management. How did everyone benefit from this?
Yeah. And IBM does a great job at training. I've talked to a COO in another startup company who, kind of, sharpened his teeth at IBM. And he said that very quickly was exposed to multi-million-dollar project, handling a bunch of teams, and they had to kind of, catch on to the technology very quick. IBM doesn't do, small stuff. So you end up, it's some, like I said, multi-million-dollar project that have a lot of responsibility, and very quickly you got to, catch on to that as well. And also what's interesting is, like, I saw that you and this I have to say, you were at Trustwave. You left Trustwave and then you came back at a much senior level, which is also really interesting. Maybe you can touch upon that at some point.
Well, I was just about to say that's what excited me so much about coming back to Trustwave with the opportunity to really help shape and enhance. And, at the time, Trustwave has been in business for over 20 years. And so, which is, in the cybersecurity landscape, there's not a ton of organizations with that type of history that's out there in the market. And so what really excited me about coming back and, working with Trustwave was to really help look at, well, how do we, transform internally in shifting a, business that had been historically very PCI and compliance focused. Like many of the clients in the industry that we worked in, from the early 2000s, into kind of now the 2020s. So if that shift from being very, kind of overly compliance focused to, well, let's get compliance by design. And so the, coming back to Trustwave and working with our senior leadership team and working, we'll call it, with the platform of the business and identifying, well, what makes Trustwave special? And, there's a lot of folks that came from large organizations like myself, like IBM, DXC, and others, but all with the sole kind of purpose of, hey, let's go do something special around a cybersecurity pure play. And, and above and beyond kind of just, managed services or managed detection response. Like, how do we look at around cybersecurity, really helping organizations end to end? right? All the way through and be able to support kind of meet where they need to be met. Not force a square peg in a round hole because that fits, our service catalog and business model. More of let's structure a service catalog that allows us to be modular like Lego bricks and really support, well, what's the client problem statement, and really start to look at, well, how do we, do they need help from a, strategy and planning? Is it more of deployment and integration? Is it more of that testing and kind of, call it breaking and hardening of their environment and testing the program? Is it more about sustainment? Sustainment from everything from kind of their vulnerability risk program, their vendor risk management, to their cyber defense program, their SOC. So it was, I really liked being able to come back to Trustwave and help accelerate Trustwave's growth, leveraging kind of the experiences and lessons learned from all these other great places.
Did you work with some of the same folks, or were you potentially managing some of the folks that were peers, or how did that work?
It was similar to some of the same folks, and so we've gone through an evolution in terms of our team. So I came here and there was some very similar folks. Over the time in our own evolution, there's been opportunities for us to really prioritize. Do we have the right folks in the right roles, much like any other business, to ensure that we are continuing to be agile to our clients' needs and the way that we envision the market continuing to grow. And so all these pieces and the attractiveness for my role as Chief Information Security Officer became like, well, it's a great opportunity to make sure that what we're communicating to the market, we do ourselves, right? To ensure it, and that became such an important part of this role of being a CISO at a security company, where everybody has an opinion and perspective inside the walls of the organization about what great looks like, but to really be able to partner and look at altruistically that my mission here in Trustwave and partnering with the security, I'll call it security organizations in the market, is I'm here at Trustwave to I have the ability to solve a macro challenge. Right, really looking at between capacity and skills as kind of the that macro challenge that we had in the market of how do I leverage and work with our product team, our MSS, our consulting team under Nick Elsmore to really ensure that we are really kind of continuously pushing the envelope to make sure that we're supporting the market effectively.
So you have to practice what you preach.
You absolutely do. Otherwise, it's a very thin veneer. If we're out there helping organizations when we're not, doing it ourselves.
So how do you know you're effective? So when you are, was a consultant in more of a kind of a sales environment role, you're successful because, bottom line is that, okay, this revenue attached to your name directly or indirectly. But now as a CISO, how do you know you're effective?
So it's an interesting question because on what I think there's a fairly easy answer, and then there's a fairly kind of nuanced answer as well. So I would say on one level is just, with greater visibility comes better analytics. Stronger analytics gives a very quantifiable ability to say, are we getting better at X? Are we getting better in terms of from vulnerability discovery to remediation? Can we have a benchmark taken at X date and then look at our effectiveness, 90 days from that date? And now we have something super quantifiable to share and demonstrate, our enhanced operating model, our enhanced processes, that tool that we went and bought, these new partners that we've brought in, all these things have helped move and kind of allow us to quantify, are we getting better, above and beyond just security maturity benchmarking, which is another, I think, index to help, I'll say, the business or call it the non-security personnel of an organization really identify, are the projects materializing or synthesizing into a way that you're actually elevating your maturity across identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. The other way outside of, I'll call it reporting and analytics, because that could be a session to itself. Breaking down how we look at, what do great metrics look like for detection response? What do great metrics look like for, continuous, compliance posture management? Is around employee happiness and culture. And so I look at a big part of effectiveness in this role is how do you rally others to the cause that you're waving as a CISO as an organization? How do you invite others to share the challenges and problems with you? Is I think a big emphasis of a CISO's barometer of success.
It can be super tough though, Kory, because I think that's it's kind of a known fact almost that cybersecurity professionals are always in a bad mood.
That either cybersecurity or IT professionals or maybe someone in audit. No, it just there's I think
or at least more stressful. Like they're all like stressed out all the time.
Right.
Especially before a long weekend because they're gonna get hit.
Well, I think there's a way to gamify. I'll call it the monotony of the everyday. And I think there's ways that as leaders, we need to make sure we're maximizing our exploration in working with, not just the security, call it the security tower. I've heard this concept of silos of excellence. And it's, and as the bigger you are, and Trustwave is a global organization. We have operations across 4 different continents. We have, over 1,500 employees in our organization. But there's organizations smaller and there's organizations bigger. And usually this challenge, the larger you get, the more mergers and acquisition you have, a little bit the more gnarly it becomes. But I still think altruistically, the goal is that, how can, if as a security leader, if you're not able to help flatten the organization, if you're not able to help flatten and create more perforated silos, right? Not hard silos, not hard lines, but more cross-functional communication, more horizontal and diagonal communication, not just communication up to your senior managers. Your senior managers then talk to each other, and then communications goes back, and communication orders go back down. I do look at a big key to success is getting, I'll call it cross-functional teams of excellence that are, dare I say, fusion, right? But fusion in nature, where you get more inclusivity of perspectives, of backgrounds between HR, legal, IT, and InfoSec to look at a problem that maybe, some organizations would look for InfoSec by itself to solve. And, if InfoSec was to take that banner and try to do it themselves, I mean, could you do that? Yeah, but are you really plugged in and able to link that and bridge that back to the business? That I think is going to be more of a challenge. So I think it's so important to where we started from in terms of how do I measure success, or are we moving the needle? Is how much are the teams talking to one another without me? And how much are they proactively coming with ideas versus reactively waiting for ideas to, essentially being told what to do, that they're empowered to kind of bring ideas forward. And it's more about let's scrum and work together and ensure that you have the support you need for success. And then who else from the business are you sharing this problem with? Like this security initiative is also bringing efficiencies to our asset inventory and IT team. Hey, that's awesome. That's a shared win for IT and security. Full speed ahead.
Yeah, and we've seen companies now starting to, even startup companies starting to hire CISOs as part of the competitive edge. Saying, hey, we're secure, we take security seriously, and it's becoming more pronounced. Don't you miss the days? So now you're on call all the time. Don't you miss the days you can just turn your smartphone off and kind of like go on vacation? I'm assuming that you can't do that now because you have a very particular role.
Well, I do think it's important for. And it's interesting. I've had conversations with this with peers as well. Of is it do we want to encourage that type of behavior as leaders? If I were to go on vacation and say, hey, reach me if you need me. I always got my bat phone. I'm going to work while I'm on vacation. Am I setting the right message to the team for when they go on vacation? Mm-hmm. And I look at any member of the team, right, for a successful operating model. I think a good way to assess if your operating model is really functioning well or working is, can someone go on vacation and totally disconnect? And if the answer is no, then it provides a good opportunity to come and have that internal conversation about, well, why not? So how do we take this artisan's mindset? How do we take this individual where we're so single-threaded because of individual X and find a way to offload that burden, whether it's the CISO, whether it's the head of CERT, whether it's the head of threat intel, whoever that individual may be. Maybe it's a lead security architect, maybe it's someone in IT. But being able to look at your operating model and say, is our operating model so dependent on any one individual that if that individual was to go on vacation for 5 days, we would make them take their laptop, make them take their phone, and say, well, enjoy your vacation, but if we need you, you better answer. Yeah. I don't think that's the direction. I don't think that's the way we should be going. Right? I don't. I think that's a great opportunity to actually look, I go on vacation, I plan to disconnect. Now, is there a way for folks to reach me? Absolutely. But in the same token, I'm trying, very hard to ensure that our culture is one of, let's get our operating model right. And the operating model should be sustainable, not overly dependent on an individual. It should be, agile and dynamic in terms of, if some individual's away, how do we pivot? So I'd be interested in your take, David, right? Because that's one that I think we've historically.
I love that. And I it's not an answer that I was expecting. But I mean, it makes total sense. And I think actually people would appreciate the fact that you put the trust in them in the sense that, okay, I'm gone, but it's your responsibility now. You can take over because I trust you 100% to do the right thing. I don't necessarily have to be on top of everything when I'm away. That shows, trust internally, and will make people feel more important and more appreciated, I think. Especially when it's not for such a long time. Maybe afterwards they'll realize why they don't want to take on your role, because they have too much responsibility.
Yeah, if we nerd out for a moment, if Captain Kirk is on the bridge of the Enterprise and he steps away, what does he say? He's like, number 2, you have the con, right? Essentially his, the decision-making authority, the power and authority of Captain Kirk has now been, bestowed to number 2. So I think even the message it sends internally in your business of, it's the, you have and you make the effort to hire the right people, you hire great people, you ensure that you can keep these great people. I think it's imperatively important to ensure that these individuals are able to get at least flashes of visibility with other parts of the business. Otherwise, you become very throttled. You become, the delta, right, in terms of communication, in terms of confidence. Of, well, what are we going to do when individual X gone? Is I don't know. We don't know who's behind individual X, right? That for me is a riskier scenario than ensuring of, hey, let's as we assess our playbooks and processes and just kind of everyday operating model, how do we, just a fundamental question of individual X goes on vacation, how do we ensure we're sustainable? How do we ensure the operation continues?
Yeah, and it's it's like that model where I think Netflix disconnects certain servers on purpose. Well, basically you're doing that with people, where you disconnect them to see if the organization still strives afterwards. I think there's something to be said there as well. So do you only do internal security today, or do you also customer facing still?
So I'm not doing customer facing billable work, but
right.
It's extremely important to me that our clients have know who the CISO of Trustwave is. Mm-hmm. Because and as I look at our own vendor risk management program, as I look at our own supply chain, especially for our top critical suppliers, I want to at least know who the CISO of these organizations are, because they're so important to our business model. And so I look at that as an extended courtesy with our clients as well, in terms of, Trustwave plays an imperatively important role with the organizations that we support and partner with. So, I look at my ability to, extend communication, be an outlet, have dialogue, and be another individual to talk and strategize with, as being extremely important. So I make it a big emphasis of mine to ensure I know who our clients are, and I would do that if I was the CISO of another organization, as well. As I think it's a constant reminder of what are we protecting, what are we responsible for, and understanding our role is critically important for us to ensure that we are prioritizing, the programs that we prioritize internally, that we do it with the continuous reminder that we're doing it because we are partnering with organizations across our consulting and advisory, through our products and through our managed security services and MDR services. So I continue to engage with, I'll call it, with clients about their initiatives, their vision, their program. But through, I enjoy, as a peer and as a sounding board. Right. And that's sometimes I bring that feedback internal. Sometimes it's something that we strategize and we think about. Maybe it's something that we can, share together. Maybe it's around kind of, hey, what analytics are you using? Kory, what analytics are you using? Is there anything that, we can do internally? And that's not an engagement, right? That's just being a good partner.
Yeah. And I think a lot of CISOs these days rely heavily on their peers in terms of figure out like what path they should take, because let's be frank, it's a noisy environment out there. There's just so many vendors out there. There's a lot of marketing noise. And so I think they rely heavily on, what others are doing. And I think especially when they see Trustwave being an organization that's been around for 20 years and is core, on security, coming back to you and saying, hey, what are you doing for X carries a lot of weight, because it's your, you don't, make widgets for a living. Your core business is security.
Yeah. And I'm a big believer in, I'll call it, for us to really get ahead of the curve. It's really about how do we establish communities that really emphasize a herd mentality as we convoy from point A to point B in the future. And I look at this, a community much like a mesh network of intelligence, of community, of knowledge sharing, of best of breed policy, processes, of playbooks, because whether it's, there's so many different analogies to tap into here. But it's the, with the, I'll call it the lions on the periphery, right? Ensuring that the pack stays together, ensuring that we have a herd mentality, and Trustwave's role in facilitating that with our community and being engaging with the community. These are things that really we look at and assess, are we being a vendor or are we being a partner? And I think as being a partner, we want to make sure that we are engaged and being part of solving this, I call it macro problem, right? We need to run a business effectively to do that. But at the end of the day, we're motivated in our DNA and our company, kind of mission statement and structure is to help ensure that we are solving these challenges around data proliferation at a rate that it is just not feasible for anyone to do this alone in the future. Without tapping into, we talk about AI, and I'll minimize the eye roll on camera for that. But, we talk into unlocking the potential of technology platforms. And look, technology platforms are rapidly evolving and adopting, but so are, the pressures to, the skills to, do you have the right skills to even unlock and utilize that technology? What I love about Microsoft's strategy, but it's a relative newcomer to the security scene, is it's not like there's this rapid adoption of Microsoft E5 security, but it's not like there's unlimited Microsoft security skills out there in the market. It doesn't have the depth and breadth as a security product as some of the other vendors you may see out there in the wild. So you got this incredibly powerful toolkit. So how do you make sure you're maximizing your acceleration and adoption in the use of it, so that you're unlocking its potential? And so it's concepts like this at the speed and the evolution that we see products evolving in what I'll call it the technology arms race, that everyone is there's so much competition, there's so much investment. These products are evolving quarter after quarter at a rate that we haven't seen. But that's absolutely a big part of how I look at how do we, our role as Trustwave and my role as CISO of Trustwave, looking to engage a community to strengthen that community, whether they're a customer or not. Because at the end of the day, we have customers. We want to make sure we have great customers. But we're motivated by solving this skills and capacity challenge in the market.
When you join the role, like 120 days in, what was kind of your first, action did you take to really grab, because you took ownership of existing infrastructure, existing processes in place, existing personnel, and so on. How did you take ownership and figure things out, take a real grasp at what's the lay of the land currently, and then design the kind of the roadmap of what needs to be done? Because I'm sure there's something needs to be done. Nobody's perfect. And then the second part of this conversation is, did you have to make difficult decisions in terms of, okay, everybody has limited resources like anybody else. How do I minimize the risks, with the best bang for the buck? How do I get my organization from A to B with the least amount of expenses associated with it?
Sure, absolutely. So I think many individuals in this role would say if they come into an environment new, and I don't even think it's limited to security. I think anyone entering a new environment, whether it's security related or not, is situational awareness. And so, coming in, and even though, after leading, the architecture integration business for Trustwave globally from our, consulting and professional services team, it was an opportunity to really get clarity and understand, what does the estate look like? What is the current state processes and technologies that are fully being utilized or not utilized, taking an inventory of the environment, getting an understanding of the individuals and the smart people here. The individuals that may have not had, more exposure to, even with a move internal, whether it's a move internal or coming in from the outside. I think it's so important to ensure that there's a perspective of getting a clarity to kind of who's here, and are they happy? Are they not happy? And if they're not happy, is it, look at to why, were they in a position?
How do you know they're not happy, Kory? Like, would they be completely upfront and tell you about it, or just, how do you find out about that?
It's amazing if you ask someone, if you just ask people questions, sometimes you get some very honest answers. My concern is sometimes leaders may not always be asking that question or afraid to ask those questions. And making sure it's okay for individuals to frame their perspectives and opinions of, hey, are you in a good place or are you not? Part of my role as a leader, or any role as a leader, is to ensure of how do we look at, well, is it the environment, or is it kind of the structure for success? Or is it, have you kind of your needs evolved and you actually want to do something totally different? And that's okay too. So making sure, kind of inventorying and having these honest, transparent conversations has been a big part of, I'll call it, setting the baseline for expectations of success. And so above and beyond, I mean, I could say things like, going through and leveraging an ISO 2700 or NIST CSF or CIS, top 18 framework. I mean, any one of those frameworks would give you some perspectives about what kind of maturity benchmarking and scoring, which would give you, a sense of where you're at. But going down to the human layer and having conversations about, how do we look at our ability to, get things done? What are some of your roadblocks as an operator, right? What are things that are taking up your capacity? And is it more on the vulnerability side? Is it something technical? Is it something, do you have too many meetings? Just where are the time sinks, for, and I think this is imperatively important to ensure when you do that in the first 90 days to give you a good sense of, well, where do you go from here? All right. And do you need to make changes that are mutually agreeable in terms of this isn't a right fit? Do you need to make changes that are okay, this is the right fit, but need to give some better structure and guidance in terms of what success looks like? Is it a great fit of, look, this is a diamond in the rough that just hasn't got enough visibility, right? And it's incredibly sharp, talented, group of resources that just needs some better guidance and support. So that became, I look at processes and governance as there's almost no report that someone needs to go fix processes and governance, which again, I would look at, how do you flatten especially a business that's heavily, cross-functional, where you don't have a team of 50 dedicated cybersecurity personnel or 100 dedicated cybersecurity personnel, and look at the healthy efficiencies between InfoSec, legal, HR, and IT, and start creating, more of that organic dialogue if it didn't exist yet. And, I think I was fortunate that there was a team, I think IT and security is almost like cats and dogs. Like sometimes when you go from organization to organization, I think I really have the benefit here of a very, very mature, very kind of, longstanding, intimate relationships between, I'll call it the teams here today. But just because they had good relationships doesn't mean that the governance and the communications and the cadences really should have been where they should be. So I look at, absolutely above and beyond the situational awareness of a gap analysis lens is, how do we set the precedence in what does good look like in communication? What does good look like in governance? And I think that's something you can do in the first 30 days, never mind 90.
And did you establish like any new, like you mentioned it, reporting mechanism or new, habits for the organization? It's because they always say that the DNA of the executives really leads the way in terms of the rest of the organization, right? So, and you can tell that, sometimes if, the head is not so great or whatever, the rest of the company will follow suit and vice versa. So did you establish anything that would say, okay, it has like the Kory stamp all over it?
Well, if it's the Kory stamp, we might be doomed. No, I think there's so much we can learn. So I have an 8-year-old and I have a 4-year-old. And I think there's so much we can actually learn from the incredible teachers in the school system, from STEM, the academic rigor, what we observe during, some schools' ability to do remote learning really well, some that had some, bigger challenges than others. And, for me, looking at the culture of establishing empowerment, empowering the voice of individuals in the same way that I see some of these great schools empower the voice of these young learners, young adults. It resonates just as well in the professional environment. And how do we encourage success through failures? How do we make sure it's okay to voice, and to try and fail, but fail fast and then move on. And that's how we learn. That's how we grow. That's how we evolve. My concern would be, I've seen it where, that the fail fast mentality is that, someone, doesn't hit the mark, that we give up so quickly. And that person's no good. They don't know what they're talking about. They're inefficient. And which then stymies the creativity of a culture and a business, because others see that individual who took that risk, took that lens, and then essentially was not rewarded even for the attempt and the bravery to take that step forward. So that's been, I'll call it, if I was to have a stamp, that's been a big part of ensuring, I'll call it, the empowerment of individuals to get things done. And really, as a leader, it's my role to support them and to help ensure that, prioritization sometimes needs some guidance. And, hey, I want to go solve this world problem. And like, oh, well, maybe draw, that's a great problem, but how do we chunk that up? Right? How do we kind of break?
Kory, I think your audio died. Can you hear it? Kory? Check the audio. I think your audio died on us. Let me check. Something happened. I don't know if the audio went off. Let me see here. Chat. Weird, right? It's like there's no audio. I don't hear you as well. Can you hear me? Your audio just died. One second. Let's see. Your audio died. Let's see. Yeah, it died. Just I can't hear you. Say something? Nothing, right? Yeah, I can hear anything. My audio seems correct. It looks like, 1 second. Yeah. Yeah, you lost sound both inbound and outbound. Just unplug and try a laptop and nothing came through. Let me see. Do you want to the browser? Try again. Let's see. Okay, I think you're back.
I can hear you now.
Yeah, you're back. It's all of a sudden it went dead. Like and it's funny because I could see like your bars just disappearing, like the audio bars.
Yeah, no. I know. I was like, wait, but everything went dead. Like even the audio in. Right?
Yeah, it's weird. It's like it's a glitch in the matrix. So let me we can wrap it up in like 10 minutes. So let me switch gears here a little bit. Since you have the privilege of working with one of the kind of the brand name security, and you've been asked, from peers in the industry, what's your take on the environment right now? We see, a kinetic conflict in Eastern Europe. Ransomware was ramping during the pandemic. What are kind of the top, topics of concern right now for executives, and how they're preparing for the next year to come? Because it's always about preparation. It's always about planning. Everything is project driven in the enterprise. So what do you see in kind of from your interactions?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll answer at one level in terms of kind of a philosophical lens, and then try to bring some practical measures with it. It's from a philosophical perspective, it's from a business angle. I try to almost answer it of how do we make sure our organization's people, process, and technology, right? How do we ensure that we have an operating model for digital resilience that gives us sustainability, scale, right? The ability to kind of dial up and dial down depending on where we see threats, and then agility to, no matter what those threats are, of how proactive or how even close to predictive can we get, so that regardless of what conflict occurs in any region, that no matter kind of what things are created, net new types of malware, net new types of tactics, techniques, and procedures, threat actors, internal, inside the organization, external, but how do we ensure that we have an operating model that is resilient, agile, and sustainable, and what are the people, process, and technologies to make that operating model work? And I feel if as a business, and across the business, right? So across the senior leadership team can answer that question, then I think the organization is a really good place to be, I'll call it, in front of the future threat, right? In front of how we look at, no matter what trends start to occur, we'll be in a good place to maximize our ability to be prepared for it, on the front end. Now, more kind of the tactically in terms of some of the, I'll call it the negative windfall out of the conflict that we see in Ukraine and Russia. I am concerned. I'm a big fan of history, and I do think history tells us that we'll see for the next 18 to 24 months things like wiper, right? Things like that we've seen. Even the, I'll call it, increase in targeted sophistication and coordinated, collaborated types of attacks, where denial of service is used as a distraction, not the primary objective. But denial of service is really good about, causing, being very visible, absorbing resources, both technical resources and personnel resources, and then, then pivoting, I'll call it the attack or to the primary objective. And so it's the combination of, the concern of, wiper has no intention of collecting financial ransomware. This is a destructive type of attack where it's not about your playbook of how do you, pull in a negotiator. This is not about a playbook of how you tap into your, I'll call it your ransomware playbook. This is entirely about your speed to identify something nefarious inside your environment that's full intention is malicious to be disruptive and to destroy data or services or, we'll call it aspects of your organization's operation. The other part is, as we look at, there's been so much attention to ransomware, and rightfully so. And I'd like to think that I've been fairly vocal on this, but it's we see the perimeter kind of dissolve with the adoption of OT. Kind of we look at almost the lines of OT and corporate starting to dissolve organically. Due to 5G adoption and business innovation, right? It's just, how do we become faster? How do we, environments that used to be historically air gapped, organizations are continuously looking at how do they get increased competitive advantage and efficiencies in these environments. And so we look at, how do we ensure that we have the ability, not just from a ransomware kind of threats to these types of estates and environments, and ask ourselves, do we have playbooks for these environments? But how are organizations looking to, attack and deliver threats to these types of environments? And I don't think that's, there's a lot of tried and true behaviors. We talk about ransomware has been actually around for some time. It just picked up a trend, over the last 2 years in particular. DDoS has been around forever, but it picked up a trend in 2014, right? 2015, we saw a lot of FinServ organizations get targeted. And that was a kind of a hyper trend for a bit. I think we are seeing increased sophistication of nefarious actors' use of social intelligence to adapt the way they do business email compromise and personal email compromise. And I do think that's an area that organizations need to be vigilant about ensuring, your BEC playbook, your business email compromise playbook, there's a lot of layers now of sophistication from kind of spray and pray in terms of what's just kind of what's your secure email gateway catching versus a group that may have done 12, 18, 24 months of account intelligence on your business, with the idea of kind of, less volumetric focus and attacks and much more, focus, increase the probability with better research. And so those are the types of threats that I see increasing given the amount of intelligence that's just available through social media, through LinkedIn, through Twitter, through a variety of sources. And it's not just, your corporate executives, but it's your friends and family as well. So These are the things that I'm very concerned with.
Yeah, it's amazing, Kory. The amount of open source intelligence, OSINT, out there, it's tremendous. And if all you have to do is connect the dots, as you mentioned, it doesn't have to be you. It could be your family members, posting, saying they're going to be on vacation, and all of a sudden the executive received a frantic call to transfer, to do a wire transfer. Because they know they're on vacation with the family running around and, screaming in the background. And also the economic conditions always lend themselves to, people, getting more tempted in terms of potentially, creating a shortcut. So maybe out of necessity, trying to make ends meet. So we're probably going to see some uptick there. And in terms of, some technology do you see, because you mentioned that you have, your roots are in kind of the SIM, technologies out there, which was great and had like great promise. But then it was like, okay, we figure out, okay, it was after the fact and not really proactive. What are the technologies that you're exposed to today that make you excited and feel that there's going to be a place for them in the near future? Because there's also a lot of hype there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think there's a lot of hype, but some of it justified as well in terms of attack surface management, right? And I think, especially as we look at the adoption of APIs and security, as we look at, as organizations have shifted now a lot of the discipline from their on-prem infrastructure. And IT programs used to be super mature in how they handled, the data center. Like it was a well-oiled machine in terms of understanding clarity with where assets are, what's getting spun up, what's not. But as we've moved to the cloud, it's become easier than ever for dev teams to spin up instances, to spin up environments. So I look at, attack surface management technologies as a area of, I'll call it high interest in terms of how much time and overhead are these products helping save to ensure that we're being proactive about having this continuous discovery above and beyond our vulnerability program. Right, but how are we doing this continuous posture management discovery across our estate, and then how do we automate it? And then the power of automation, and as automation matures, there's a lot of organizations. SOAR is another one of these interesting things like SIM, where SOAR came out, and I think a lot of organizations that bought a SOAR had probably utilized maybe 5 to 10% of its overall functionality and horsepower, just because it's such a different skill set from security historically. We're talking about a supply chain modeling process. We're talking about business process management. These are things that haven't always been highly prioritized in InfoSec. And so looking at the ability to look at a supply chain process through business process management of outside of just your IR and automated IR, how do we just automate workflow? How do we get increased contextual enrichment? How do we take things that are CSV files today and doing static pulls to now getting kind of dynamic contextual enrichment to a variety of different systems and environments, but giving us better situational context and intelligence as a operator about threats in the environment? And then how do we, do we want to automate? Are we mature enough to automate? Is the data good enough to automate? Are we missing the right data to automate? So between automate, the attack surface management, I think, is a super valuable technology. API security, I'm still, for me, it's almost like a new spin to peer-to-peer connections, just at a different scale. But it's still, there's kind of nefarious and policy violations that we look at API security, but it's critically important because I do look at API security as a soft underbelly to a degree, in terms of we got to understand, understand what data is there. We got to understand the communication. We got to understand who's using it. And also technologies around how we simplify our vendor risk management. In terms of, that's another area that from either a GRC lens or an InfoSec lens, depending on the size of your security organization, that's a process that sometimes has dependencies on finance, enhancing its procurement processing. There's a lot of overhead in how you look at doing this posture management. So looking at continuous, I'll call it enhancing the efficiencies of your vendor risk management program, as well as a good part or a good another attribute to your attack surface management.
Yeah, and every time you say something, Kory, I have like a million questions in my head. I'm trying to get them all in order. So a couple of things here. One is I'll mention that you touch upon almost like a universal truism, where companies do spend a lot of money on technology, and a lot of times it's only been utilized, as you mentioned, 5 to 10%. We've seen that, data loss prevention. We've seen that with email security at the time. You've seen that with SOAR. And other technologies. How do companies get better at utilizing what they currently have instead of going and buying the next, shiny object? Because that by itself can really, enhance their security posture at really low cost because they're already, made the investment in technology.
Yeah, and look at, and I think this is an area where partners can help immensely. And how many. I think historically, we would put out a job rec of I need someone that's built a SOC, or I need someone that's deployed a DLP in the past, or I need someone that's deployed a CASB. And the challenge is as these tools evolve so much and so quickly, and the skill set that you really require is not someone that's deployed one or two of these things. It's really have they deployed 10 or 20 of these things or more. And that really starts to open up, I'll call it the throttle or the aperture to look at, are we, we bought tool X 2 years ago, and what are we using it for? And are we only utilizing it for kind of the, 5% of its overall functionality of what we're paying for? And that is a question of should we keep it, or is there some, is the technology by itself fine? And we got to really just assess of, look, build, buy, or lie. And so as a security organization, you need to assess with every one of these technologies of either, we can build the skills with, team member capacity that we have in-house. The challenge is we don't often have capacity in-house. So that's typically a hard scenario. We can go out and buy someone, and which is, okay, we can go and get a point-in-time contractor, or we open up a new job rec and hire them off the street. But then we're asking them potentially to pick up a very potentially narrow scope, or a highly sophisticated niche narrow scope that may or may not be available locally or within the I'll call it the culture of the rest of our team. And then ally, right? And so how we look at, do we get benefits and scale and align with a trusted partner to help us maximize the adoption of this tech set that they're known for and that people can speak for on their behalf. But it's this product management like philosophy of running your security organization and your operating model of, look, we have tool X or we have kind of problem set X. We can either build it, we can go out and buy it, or we can ally with the industry with some form of expertise to help us turn it on and sustain it.
Yeah. I think that's why the reason why MSSPs or the managed service providers are becoming one of the fastest segments in cybersecurity is specifically what you just mentioned as, it's how do you maintain these tools? It's one thing to buy it, and then you have to maintain it. And then, the guy or the gal who's managing it happen to find a better gig somewhere else. In fact, a lot of them get trained on these products, and then they move on to, greener pastures. And then you get stuck with a tool that you spent a lot of money on. And also you mentioned, that you're doing the kind of the MVRA, like the third-party risk assessment and so on that you guys provide. Do you find that and this would be kind of the last question before the last question, because I know you got to go. What do you see from a regulatory environment? It seems like there's always this, cranking of more and more regulation, and it seems like a lot of companies out there struggle we're keeping up with that. The supply chain is ever increasing because no one wants to, people outsource whatever they can if it's not in their core business. But then on the other side of the house, you have regulation that keep coming down, whether it's not just for security, but we see that for mental and social governance, for finance. And overall, it's a very difficult environment to do business in.
Yeah, and look, I think we're going to see regulation continually, I don't know if crackdown's the right word, but continue to assess and enhance and look at, do we have, are we really protecting privacy of consumers? Are we protecting privacy of individuals? On one level, technology industry almost feels like one of the least regulated industries out there in the market when you consider some of the other important.
It's true, Kory. Like sometimes you buy a product, off the shelf product, and there's no guarantee that it's going to work, which is crazy. Right. Like you never, even in the fine print, the EULA says if your organization blows up, we're not responsible.
Well,
right?
I could almost go, I could pick on some of the video games that my daughter goes out and buys, where it's like, why do I feel like we're spending $60 on beta? Like you're actually releasing a paid for proof of concept as opposed to a formal, what used to be 10 years ago is a proper formal release that's been hardened and proven. But there's such a competitive, and this is kind of the boon and the curse where I think it's a double-edged sword. This is technology market is so competitive, right? So there is a massive push and race on one level to that all consumers are benefiting from in terms of the enhancements. But there's also a large push to get things to consumers, which I think opens up some risk to, was security at the table, it was kind of functionality trumpeted over privacy and protection.
Listen, Microsoft has been doing it for years. Look at all the versions of Microsoft that were like the majority of them were unfinished, incomplete.
Yeah, well, I do think Microsoft has done a phenomenal, I'll call it emphasis, particularly over the last 2 years, and with Satya's, I'll call it $20 billion commitment over the next 5 to really, up Microsoft's ability in their, in their security program. It is the right moves, at least from the cloud provider's perspective. But yeah, regulation and I think there's opportunities there. We're going to see more there. I think we're going to see refinements and stuff like GDPR of like, are these things, there's big financial penalties, yes, but are we actually moving the needle? And are we doing enough? Like, are we prioritizing the right things?
And then last question, and then I'll let you go, and because you got vacation to catch. One thing I'll ask is like, the sky's not falling. I like to kind of, complete the session with a positive tone. We talked about a lot of like difficult topics here. What do you see that we, again, from your vast career, that we're improving on, that you say, hey, we're just like 2022 and we're better off than we were, 2020 or 2018, any positive aspects of your role in the environment from a cybersecurity perspective?
Yeah, I do think the community building is on the right path, right? And I think that's, we look at no matter what investments we make in this concept of threat intelligence, as whether you're a partner in the industry like Trustwave, or if you're an internal organization in the industry, of how much is your threat intelligence kind of a unique differentiator. And I look at our ability to mesh our intelligence together with with trusted communities has put us on a better path than we've ever been today, historically, to ensure that we have, I'll call it the community-based approach, that it's not just about kind of who's got unique intelligence, but it's about how do we effectively operationalize it. And I think the intelligence in itself is becoming more and more, commonly shared together and quickly disseminated together. It's not something that you hold on to and keep unique to yourself and let your competitor, even let your fellow industry members, fall down on. It's something that we look at altruistically. That it's more important to for us to be successful against this ever evolving cyber threat that's highly organized, highly motivated, either financially or through other, I'll call it, objectives, that our most effective ability to stay and combat that is through this mesh mentality, this herd mentality of sharing of experiences, sharing of knowledge. And I think that's critical, and that needs to continue to enhance and improve, and as a community, everyone be open to ensure that you're with the pack and not falling behind. You're no longer, that you and your business is not actually isolated away from the herd, because now you are a stronger target. Now you are an easier target. And so with, I'll call it the technology innovation, and it'll be interesting to see how much we truly capitalize on things like artificial intelligence over the next 10 years. I'm to say that we'll build a entirely automated SOC, I would say would be entirely dependent on one's definition of what is the mission of the SOC. And if you ask 10 individuals in your room, you may get 8 to 10 different answers about the scope of what a SOC should do or does not do for your business. But I look at how we incorporate AI to give us scale, to allow the individuals that we have in the team to minimize, I'll call it the mundane, repetitive aspects of the role that can be automated and automated with some intelligence behind it to make contextual decision making about what observations will be a great part of how we look at success in 2020 to 2030.
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be, and I can't wait to see like the CISO's AI assisted technologies for the CISO decision making role as well. But we're running out of time, Kory, and thank you very much for giving back to the community by being with this session, spending the time with us. And I think the community is lucky to have you. It's almost like a blessing in disguise. And you end up, being a lawyer. But and you could have been a great one. I'm sure you're very well spoken. So until then, thank you very much for joining. How is best for people to reach out to you for knowing more about Trustwave, consulting, engagement, just getting in touch? What's the easiest way?
Yeah, so LinkedIn, I'm a big adopter of LinkedIn, right, in terms of responsible use of LinkedIn, but it's LinkedIn is my business card in this digital world. So between LinkedIn and going to trustwave.com, I'm very proud of, we have an incredible team that has enhanced and relaunched a new landing site for our website. So I do encourage folks to go see it. Give us feedback on it, and let us get some perspectives. But those would be the two best ways to get in touch with me personally and to understand Trustwave a little bit more.
Super. It's been really fantastic. Thank you very much. And for all those who joined today, thank you very much. Be safe online as well as offline. And I'll see you at the next episode. Thanks so much, Kory.
Thank you, David. Take care. Be well.
Thank you very much.